Hi everyone, so I am talking about what I have read lately for my end of the month wrap up. I'm going to try to be super quick because I have other books that I'm going to talk about later on in the week. I'm filming this now while stuff is still fresh in my head, so I will end up filming another clip like at another time so I can finish out my wrap up. So this book I read, this was Scandalous Desires by Elizabeth Hoyt. This is the third book in the Maiden Lane series. I will say I'm not super impressed with this series. Everybody's like, oh, I love this series. And I'm like, give or take. Because the first book, I liked it. It took a little bit for me to get into it, but once I did, I liked it. The second book, I didn't like. This is probably the best book of the series so far that I've liked. So we've got The Step Back, which I love. It's one thing about Elizabeth Hoyt is a lot of her step backs are really pretty. I love her step backs. So this one here, we've got Mickey and Silence. I will say Silence, I wasn't a huge fan of her. She kind of was a ding-dong. And I'd say he really saved the book because I really liked him as a character. He very much reminded me of, he kind of gave me the Derek Craven vibes because he is basically self-made man. He's gone in, he went into pirating, you know, like stealing from ships and things like that, and ended up amassing a lot of wealth. Well, in a previous book, they met and things happened. And her husband went off to sea, and he died at sea. And so it's been a year since her husband had died. So she's been taking care of this baby named Mary Darling. And Mary Darling gets kidnapped, and she suspects it's Mickey that kidnapped the baby. So she goes to his palace. That's what she calls it. And she gets there and he does have the child. And so he's basically telling her he has an enemy. The enemy is going to want to hurt people who are close to him. So he wants to keep the baby close. You know, he doesn't want anything to happen to the baby. Even though he doesn't really have an attachment to the child. But he wants to keep the child close. So she decides she's going to stay with him because she doesn't want to have to leave the baby. Because the baby is like attached to her, you know, thinks of her as her mother. Even though she doesn't say mom, it's like mo, it's more like ma, mo, kind of thing, you know. Obviously she's still learning her words because she's only like about a year old. So yeah, she stays, and Mickey slowly but surely seduces her. And I did like this one. You really got to know Mickey a little bit more in his background and the things that he had to overcome, and, you know, his parents and everything. And you really kind of get to know him more in here. And I sympathize with him. I definitely sympathize with him and his plight and, you know, things that he had to do to, you know, amass the wealth that he did, even though I don't condone stealing. Yeah, I liked it. That was pretty good. I really like his character, though. He's definitely a favorite. Definitely a favorite hero, because I really liked him. There was a scene in here he had, like, self-pleasured himself because, you know, he wanted her and he had to slowly seduce her, so he didn't want to, you know, didn't want to go and push it too fast, you know, too far. And she, you know, he didn't want her running away from him. And so he went and, you know, he was in his room and took care of himself, and she ended up witnessing it. So one thing I could say about this series is that it seems like the author likes to show more of a taboo type of thing. Like in the first book, there was a scene where the characters are watching like this sex show. And so Temperance, that was the heroine, the first one, she's witnessing it. And in this one here, Silence ended up witnessing Mickey pleasuring himself, you know, dancing with himself, basically. So that's one thing I can say about the author, is that she obviously likes to do stuff like that, you know. I'd say it's a little, these here are a little darker in tone when it comes to historical romances. They're dark, it's a darker in tone series. Definitely is more kind of like a Batman / Zorro type of, you know, thing, because we have the Ghost of St. Giles, which may be more than one person at this point, because the way I'm reading it, I'm like, So it was good. I really enjoyed this one. I tried to get into the next one in the series that has Winter in it, and Winter is from the first book. He was Temperance's and Silence's brother. So I tried to get into this one, and I ended up stopping it for now because I wasn't feeling it. I'm like, I'll get back to it another time. So we've got that, and I really like the step back. They're at a theater, so pretty, but I'll get back to it eventually. I'm just not really feeling it at this point. I was thinking of skipping that book and going into this book here, so hopefully I can maybe get to that, and I can, you know, talk about it in my next clip. But the other book I ended up reading so far that I ended up DNFing was Nicky the Driver. Now, this is a mob, you know, mafia book, and I DNF'd it around 50% because, one, I didn't feel the connection between the characters. It felt very shallow to me, like it was more lust-based than actual feelings. And also, she has a very active eating disorder in this book. If you do not want to read about a heroine who counts her calories constantly and seeing her binging and purging, you may want to skip this one, because it was just something that I wasn't anticipating. I usually don't have many triggers, but I would say this is probably a new trigger for me, because I don't want to read about a woman's internal monologue of her counting her calories so she stays thin, or I just don't want to hear about her struggles with an eating disorder. It's not something that I want to read about. It's not very romantic to me. It's very sad, and it doesn't make me happy. So I noticed lately that there's authors like Cate Wells, Anna Huang, other authors that have kind of like, they've implemented themselves onto TikTok, and I think they listen to their TikTok audience a little bit more than other people. And kind of reminds me of Penelope Douglas. Penelope Douglas has listened to her audience for her Facebook page a little too much. And I think it's very problematic, because unfortunately, these young people don't know what love is. They don't know what love is. They don't know what having this connection is. They just think about sex, sex, sex. Because that's all you think about when you're young. When you're young, you just kind of like, you know, you're all, you know, hormonal and everything, and your body is just basically like reproduce, reproduce, reproduce. That's basically what your body wants you to do. You know, this is why you have, like, you know, certain, you know, you all of a sudden it's like, you know, especially with young men, it's like a breeze can hit your penis and it's getting erect, you know. That's how easy of a trigger it happens for, you know, guys when you're young. And then when you get older, it's, you know, it's all down there from there, buddies. Literally, you have to end up using that little blue pill just to get you up. So, yeah. So, for women, it's the same thing. When you're young, you're, you know, just think about sex and all that stuff. Especially now, everybody kind of has this, like, hookup culture. I don't get it. It's kind of been pushed for years for women to do this. Like, oh, well, guys can do it. Women can do it too. And I'm like, no. I just don't like it. For me personally, it's not a good feeling. You know, it's not a good feeling, because guys, it's all physical. For women, it's mental. Eventually, you develop feelings for this guy that you're hooking up with. He doesn't feel the same for you. And now you got a broken heart. So for me, it's just, I don't know, sometimes it's better just to wait, hold off, self-pleasure, you know, and wait for someone special to come along rather than just hooking up with like random guy after random guy after random guy, you know? So, I don't know. It just seems like lately that's the pressure of like, you know, hookup culture, hook up with as many dudes as you can, and it seems like it's kind of reflecting in to a lot of romance lately, and I just don't like it. That's not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for romance. I'm looking for an actual romance. If I think I would prefer less sex scenes if there was more of a romance in it over more sex scenes and no romance. You know, if it's just this couple Fucking, I don't want it, you know, because you're basically reading erotica or porn at this point. So I don't know, just I want more of a connection, and I'm just not feeling it with these authors lately. So I've been really like not liking a lot of new authors lately. So I've been trying to like go back to reading like older stuff, like older books, things like that, where I know there's a romance in the book. I'd rather read that. I kind of like, when I go to Barnes and Noble, like especially for my kids, I go there usually for them. I don't really buy anything for myself anymore. You know, when I go into the romance section, if maybe I can find a historical romance that maybe I'll like, but most of the books there, not interested in them, because they either, it's not a romance at all, like most of Colleen Hoover books that is all over the place in my Barnes and Noble. I mean, they're all over Barnes and Noble. Most of her books are not romance. She may classify herself as a romance author. She's not. She's women's fiction or thrillers. You know, It Ends With Us is a women's fiction. It is not a romance, and it is not a, what do they put it as, a love triangle? There's no love triangle in there. The dude is a physical and emotional abuser. You know, the other guy she gets involved with was a dude she met when she was like a kid, you know, when she was younger. So for me, those books just don't appeal to me. So most of what I see now aren't anything that appeal to me. So I end up going back to like older books, you know, or maybe if some indie authors have some books out there that they are really more focused on the romance, you know, I prefer that, because the stuff that I've been getting lately, is questionable. So yeah, I will talk about my next books. Okay, so the next book I'm going to be talking about is Nobody's Duke by Scarlett Scott. I believe that's the name of the author. Now, this is the first book in a series. I'm not sure if I'm going to read the rest of the series. I'll see. I want to kind of skip around to see if there's any other books by the author that I want to read from her, because I ended up giving this one a 3-star. Now, the reasons why I gave this one 3 stars is, well, we have this, it's a second chance romance where Lady Araminta, she's a duchess, her husband was killed. He was like into politics, he was like a politician, and he ended up getting murdered. So she's a widow now, and her and her son's 7, and they are, you know, basically all alone, and she ends up getting like threats to like target her next. So people who are part of like this home office, like investigative, you know, services, they decide to put basically a bodyguard on her tail, you know, just to kind of like, you know, be stationed at her home, so that way helps protect her so she doesn't get harmed, or her son doesn't get harmed. So it ends up being this man named Clayton. Now, her and him have a history where 8 years ago they were in love, they were going to get married, something happened and it tore them apart. So they have very much a dislike for each other. This one believes this story, the other one believes another story. So it has most of the way through of the book, it has this continuing miscommunication where she believes these lies that were told, and then I'd say weren't really lies, but more of like assumptions that she had. And then for him, he was straight up lied to, by somebody. And so they have a lot of like animosity toward each other. So it makes the story, a lot of people were saying like this reminded them of like Again the Magic by Lisa Kleypas. Similar, but I would say I still like Lisa Kleypas's book way better. So at the beginning, you clearly can see that they are still attracted to each other. They still want each other. They still love each other, even though they don't want to love each other. But they still have that, lust. There's still that lust. There's still like that sexual attraction to each other. Now, it kind of goes between present, and then it switches to the past of like how they met, what happened, and things like that. There also is I would say a trigger warning. I know some people don't like this, but there's a secret child in here. So I'm just saying, like, if you're not into secret child, you may want to avoid this book. But there's a secret child. He knocked her up like 8 years ago. He has no idea that he's a father. So this was the other thing that kind of irritated me about the book. So I noticed the first thing about this book that kind of really took me out of the story was there was a lot of internal dialogue between the characters. He kept thinking of all these thoughts about her. She kept thinking about all these thoughts about him, but neither one of them were willing to communicate with each other. So it just really like took me out of the story and just made me like, I don't know if this is the way the author writes or if this is just this book. I'm going to check out other books from the author, but if she has like a lot of internal dialogue with other books, then I'm assuming this is how the author writes. So I'm not sure if the author is right for me, but I will check out at least another book of hers just to give her a second chance and see if maybe it's just this book that I just disliked. But we had a lot of internal dialogue. It really took me out of the story. I wanted more speaking, communicating with each other. Even if it's hostile, I would rather have that than just the constant thoughts in their head. So there was that. That was the one. The second thing was they didn't stop arguing with each other until after the 50% mark. It was maybe like around 60% or so that the dam broke and they started like, pounding away like bunnies, basically just going at it like constantly. So there was that. And I was like, there was no like, some authors have a way of like building up the tension to where when the dam breaks, you're like, yes, finally. I was at that point in the book where I was like, I wanted to DNF it. I honestly wanted to DNF the book. I will say, once they started communicating with each other and you could see how she felt a little bit more and how he felt, it made the book a better book to me, but it still wasn't good enough to me to where I would give it 4 or 5 stars. There was like, the spicy scenes I would say was probably like a 4 out of 5. There was a good amount of spice scenes, but I felt like it was more lust based and them like Fucking, then more of like love or making love type of thing. There's a difference between making love and boning. So to me, I just felt like it was a lot more of them boning than like having some kind of like bond in the bedroom kind of thing, you know? So I kind of felt that way toward it. And like I said, I don't know if it's just this book or if that's just the way she writes. So, also I felt like it was a little modern to me. Like it wasn't like, because it's based in a history. It's supposed to be a period piece, like a historical romance. So it should be a little bit more historical, and it felt like a lot of stuff he was saying was more modern, like, just the way he'd like say different things to her, especially like in the bedroom and stuff like that. It felt a little more modern to me, so there was that. And yeah, that was pretty much it. I mean, her character really kind of like annoyed me, but then there were times that he was like annoying me too. Like his brother, he was like, they're like half brothers, because Clayton is basically a biblo. He's, he's the product of an affair. And so he was basically a bastard, what they call a bastard child. And so, there was like the class difference, which Era didn't care. She was like, I don't care if you're a bastard. Don't matter to me. I love you anyway. And so that's what kind of caused like this separation, because, he was given this letter that made it sound like that she didn't care. And I was kind of like, how do you believe that this is what, how do you believe the letter? Especially for the fact that it's like, he had talked to her father, and her father was like, no, you will never marry my daughter. So it's like, wouldn't you put two and two together and figure out that maybe it's her father that's pushing this and not her? Why wouldn't you question it? Why wouldn't you like maybe try to get her alone sometime? Like, really kind of like, stalk out the place to see if you can get her alone and say, hey, I got this letter. Is this true? Because then she'd read a letter and be like, that's not true. So to me, it's like, he stupidly believed this letter, and I just felt like he was kind of dumb in that instance. And then also, when they go and they finally see each other after like 8 years, his brother, his half-brother, as soon as he met Araminta and met her son, he knew that was Clay's son. He's like, that is the spitting image of Clay. He's like, that child's the spitting image of Clay. I know that's Clay's son. Yet when Clay gets to the home, doesn't see it at all. And it's not until like weeks go by that he's like, he's like, oh, is Edward my son? And it's like, fucking duh, dude. I'm like, your brother and your mother saw it before you did. How the fuck do you not see it? How do you not see it? How can you be so freaking blind? So I just felt like the author made him kind of dumb. And it's like, for someone who's supposedly an investigator, you're not very smart, okay? Come on. So, yeah, for me, I was like, okay. I felt like there was a lot of dumb decisions on the author's part for, like, why this separation, why it continued for as long as it did. So I was like, come on. So, yeah, to me, I was like, I already knew at the beginning of the book, I'm like, oh, parents are going to separate these two. I just know it. And it's like, it just really was like very predictable. So yeah, I would say like this one here, I don't know if it's just a one-off. Like, I read someone's review and they said they really disliked this book, but they really liked her other books. So I'm like, well, I'll give her a second chance and see if it's like, maybe it's just that book that just didn't do for me. I don't know, but really just didn't like it. I really just was like, ugh. It finally, like I said, it got to the point where they started doing it, and I'm just like, I really didn't care at that point. I was kind of like, just, okay, let's just get through this. Yeah. There's some historical authors that just really kind of like immerse you into the story and really kind of like, you know, you kind of have those like butterflies in your stomach and everything. And then there's some authors that are just like, they're writing historicals, but they really should probably write contemporaries, because some of them I feel like they're a little too modern with the way they like word things and stuff like that. And I've been reading historical romances for years, so it's like you kind of get the lingo and stuff. So when you discover like a new author, it's like, oh, it's kind of like, it's a little different, it's a little modern. I don't like the modern takes that they've done with the books and stuff like that. There's some people who've done that, and they made like these characters like really modern, and I'm just like, I don't know, I just don't like that. The whole reason why I read a historical romance is because I want to be taken into the past. I don't want to be, you know, I don't want to be shoved into like the now. I'm like, this is the 1800s. It's going to be way different for women in that time, you know, than it is now. I mean, we have a lot more freedoms and rights, even though some people say otherwise, but you know, we have a lot more rights. I mean, seriously, women in the US, we do not have to go and sign up when we're 18 years old for selective service. Men have to do that. So we have more rights than men in this country. So yeah, you know, when people go and say, oh, we're losing our rights, bullshit, you know, come on. So yeah, when you have like a little modernness to it, it just really takes me away from the story. And I'm just like, I don't necessarily believe it. So yeah, I'm gonna read another book of hers and see, hopefully it'll be something, you know, that I like. I don't know, we shall see. But yeah, anyways, that's gonna be it for this video, for my wrap up. I'm gonna delve into something else, you know, and I'll go back to her. Same thing with like my Elizabeth Hoyt books right here, where I had said like I took a little break from these. I stopped reading them for a little bit, just to kind of give myself a break. I can't really delve through like a whole bunch of books in a series. I may delve through like 1 or 2 books and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna take a break and I'm gonna read something else, because I kind of get bored with the series, and so I'm like, I need to take a break from it. I'll come back. I think I'll eventually go back to it and start reading it and see, you know, and then I'll try to get through that series to get into, because I have another series here where it's like, I think they're like soldiers or something, and there's like 4 books in the series, so a lot shorter. So yeah, I need to get back into those ones there. There's other books that I'm trying to read and get through. I've had some of these like historicals for like a little bit, and they're like new to me authors, so I really need to delve into them and see if I even like their writing, because I'm like, I'm not going to keep buying books from this author that I haven't even read anything from them yet. I may not even like their writing, so, you know, it's better to read them and get through them. So, yeah, that's it for this video here. Have yourselves a good day. Take care of yourselves. Be kind to each other. And I will see you all on the next video. All right. Bye.